Hi, guys. Thanks for joining the live. I wanted to talk about the protest that happened over the weekend regarding Shakopee Women's Correctional Facility in Minnesota. And I've done a few stories about this in the past. I really need a moderator. I had to look for some moderators at some point. If you want to be a moderator, let me know. Yeah, so I've done a couple of stories about this, or a few stories about this now. Absolutely shocking that at some point they allowed at least 5 male inmates who literally transferred over from the men's prison. And I guess they started self-identifying as a woman, and they allowed up to 5 male inmates into the women's correctional facility, Minnesota's only all-woman prison. And it got so bad that a female educator, she decided to quit. She had worked there for 10 years, and she decided to quit in protest of this insanity. So I'm so glad to see that over the weekend they had a protest, and Tish Hyman was there. A lot of important voices were there, women's advocates and women who had actually been former inmates of this prison. They said that, they're there to represent the other female inmates who obviously can't be there. And, it was some of the clips I've seen. I'm going to share some of those clips with you today. And yeah, this all stems from a lawsuit. I believe it occurred in 2023 that basically said that, sorry, I'm seeing the chat. Thanks for joining, guys. How can they do this to women? Just plain hatred. Yes, absolutely. I would be honored to mod for you. Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can, once I figure out how to make somebody a mod, I will make a note of that. Yeah, thanks, guys. So this all stemmed from a court case in 2023 where a trans-identifying man decided to file a lawsuit. He was backed by these LGBT groups. Gender Justice, I believe, was one of the organizations. And they backed this guy and said that they have to put him in the women's prison because it's discrimination. Not only that, they said that it was discrimination to not assist him in his transition. The guy ended up getting $500,000. Taxpayers' money was given to this guy, and he got that settlement or payout, and he was moved to the women's prison. Now, this man, I believe he goes by the name Christina Lusk. I've forgotten his real name, but he was married before. His wife came forward, I believe, speaking to Redux, saying that he was, there was some abuse there in the relationship. And she's not buying this whole transitioning thing. The guy got a boob job on taxpayers' dime. And of course, the way they present themselves is just very, it reeks of fetish, just put it that way. So let's take a look at the, I believe it was in 2023 when this whole lawsuit happened.
The first time within the Minnesota Department of Corrections, a transgender inmate will be moved to a facility matching their gender identity.
This is part of a settlement that includes a nearly $500,000 payment for the inmate as well. Last year, Christina Lusk, a transgender woman, sued the DOC over access to gender-affirming care and requested a transfer to the state's only all-women prison.
Ben Henry spoke to her attorneys today about the impact they hope this has for the several other transgender inmates also trying to be moved.
As far as we're concerned, gender justice, this is long overdue.
Jess Braverman is legal director for nonprofit Gender Justice.
It's really important that transgender people are treated with the same rights, respect, and dignity as everyone else. And that's true whether they're inside or outside of an incarcerated setting.
One of their clients, Christina Lusk, is in prison, currently held at the Moose Lake facility for a 2018 drug conviction. That will soon change. Next week, Lusk, who's identified as a transgender woman since 2008, will move south to the Shakopee Women's Only Prison. The Minnesota Department of Corrections settled a lawsuit with Lusk that sought access to gender-affirming care and the transfer to Shakopee. It's the first time in Minnesota a transgender inmate will be moved to a facility matching their gender identity.
We really hope that this lawsuit, the settlement, helps not only our client, but other incarcerated transgender people, and that's Miss Lusk's hope as well.
How's she doing?
She's doing great. She's really thrilled and pleased with the outcome.
Lusk, writing in reaction, "This journey has brought extreme challenges, and I have endured so much. My hope is that no one has to go through the same set of circumstances." As part of the settlement, Lusk and other inmates will now be able to receive gender-affirming care. In a statement, the DOC says it's constitutionally obligated to provide medically necessary care for incarcerated people, which includes treatment for gender dysphoria.
This is not a unique situation. There are other transgender people in prisons all around the country and here in Minnesota. Minnesota, unfortunately, hasn't been putting transgender people in the appropriate placements, and that should change, we hope.
The DOC says they house 48 transgender inmates and that 5 others have requested a transfer. According to the settlement, transgender or gender nonconforming inmates can ask for a transfer, quote, unless doing so would increase the risk of physical or sexual harm to the inmate or others in that facility. The DOC says they're also creating a gender identity committee to review single cell assignments, showering arrangements, and search protocols. In the newsroom, Ben Henry, Eyewitness News on 45.
So of course we've got to make sure that Christina's okay. How is she doing? Absolutely ridiculous. No fault for the women who are going to be sharing a unit with these men, which is what is happening. The showers do not have locks. I do believe that they're all in different units together. And I did one story where one of these guys was literally able to share a shower with the women. And this guy is a murderer. And I believe he had some charges of SA as well. So the women, they're sharing, their living unit or living space with men convicted of violent crimes, with men convicted of crimes against women and children, men convicted of SA, very serious, horrific stories about these men that we're going to go through as well. Whereas these women, they're in there, many of them are in there for non-violent crimes. These women have been traumatized themselves. They're in prison because of, the circumstances that they've been through. A lot of it is due to trauma that they've experienced. And, some of these women have been trafficked. Some of these women have been SA'd themselves or got involved in drugs, which usually comes hand in hand when people are trafficked, and they end up in prison. So it's not that we're talking about serial killers that in these women prisons. These are women who find themselves locked, in a unit with murderers and men who have they're literally in prison for attacking women, for assaulting women and girls. But yet they seem to think it's inappropriate to house these men with females just because of their gender identity, endangering the women. So the woman who quit, Alicia Beckmann, I believe, she has spoken up tirelessly in defense of these women. And, she's given testimonies talking about what they've experienced, what they've been put through. At the protest, the women wrote letters, gave it out for people to speak out and to read out at the protest. And it's absolutely horrific. At the minimum, they're being sexually harassed, at the minimum. And it's all a scam, if you're asking me. One of these inmates, he's bragged about basically playing the system. And these policies allow them to do that. Just see your comments here. Yeah, absolutely heartbreaking. Even more disappointing that it is a woman advocating for allowing men into women's prisons. You saw there. A woman is behind this, advocating for this guy and, making sure that he's okay. Very disappointing indeed. So let's hear from Alicia. This is one of the testimonies that she gave.
In June of 2023, unbeknownst to myself, frontline staff, and roughly 600 female offenders, Christina Craig Lusk, a biological male, was transferred to Shakopee Correctional Facility after he successfully won a lawsuit against the Department of Corrections. This decision, supported by the commissioner, opened the floodgates for the nightmare that was to follow. Multiple incarcerated men were able to manipulate the system and transfer to Shakopee thanks to an ambiguous policy riddled with loopholes that allowed the transfer of these biological males. The men who ultimately transferred to Shakopee included at least 2 sex offenders and 1 murderer with a violent history during his incarceration over the past 30 years. At no point were the staff of Shakopee given a voice. We were handed the policy and given a directive to follow it. The only training received had to do with definitions and vocabulary as it related to gender and sex. Upon voicing my concerns via chain of command regarding this new policy, I was simply told I needed to follow it. It was clear that there was no fighting this from inside. Each day, the women of Shakopee must face their fears and subject themselves to re-traumatization and re-victimization by having biological males housed within close proximity to them. Each day they wonder, will my co-defendant or ex try to transfer here? Will the man who sexually exploited me through prostitution try to transfer here next? A large percentage of incarcerated women have been victims of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse at some point in their lives. So putting violent sex offenders within close quarters to them seems punitive and counterproductive. At no point were the roughly 600 women of Shakopee given a voice in this matter. Instead, the voice of one trumped theirs. The purpose of incarceration is twofold: for punishment and to keep society safe. Once incarcerated, the Department of Corrections has an obligation to provide a safe incarceration. Putting the request of one offender's needs or desires above all others seems to negate the safety component. Roughly 90% of incarcerated individuals will be released back into society after completing their prison term. Subjecting these women to being housed with biological males is not conducive to their healing, recovery, and overall preparation to be successful upon release. For years, gender responsiveness was the big push at Shakopee. We were repeatedly taught and trained that women are different than men, and therefore we need to respond to them according to their gender, not their believed gender. Evidence-based practices that are in place at Shakopee were written for women, not men. The Department of Corrections has taken the stance that they have an obligation to provide medical treatment to include gender dysphoria. However, transferring men to a women's prison has nothing to do with medical treatment. The DOC also claims that decisions around facility placement undergo a robust and thorough review by a multidisciplinary review committee. However, the men we have seen come through the doors of Shakopee are there for one reason: to manipulate the system. It should come as no surprise that one man has already been transferred back to a men's facility and is now incarcerated at Stillwater. So much for a robust and thorough review. An administrator within the DOC made claim back in September after my Alpha News interview that there have been no reported instances of violence or threats. This is simply not true. I've spoken to several correctional officers that have filed reports on behalf of women who have been harassed, flashed, intimidated, and overall live in fear of their safety. One incarcerated woman was brave enough to step forward to share her story with Alpha News, and it spoke volumes. I think it's also worth noting that many women have not come forward due to fear of retaliation or losing privileges like early release. Staff have also remained silent due to fear of retaliation. The only reason I am able to speak today is I made the extremely hard decision to walk away from a career I loved and excelled at. I've been thanked and supported by dozens of staff for being their voice, as they can't walk away from their career. The day my students came to me in tears, not knowing what to do about their fear and concern about men being incarcerated at Shakopee, was the day I realized I could no longer help keep them safe. I knew my job would be in jeopardy had I spoken up while still employed. The environment at Shakopee shifted drastically in June of 2023 for staff and offenders and continues to be an issue today. Staff are being forced to ignore science, their morals, and to put their safety in jeopardy. Female officers are forced to do strip searches on biological males. Can you imagine what these officers have to face each day? In what world is this appropriate? This needs to stop before it gets any worse. Look at California's prison system. Women are being raped, impregnated, and assaulted by biological males. These men are taking advantage of an egregious policy, and the change needs to start today. Please stop this madness and help return Shakopee Correctional Facility to what it was intended for, a space for women only. We have a duty and obligation to them, not violent sexual predators looking for an easy incarceration, protective custody, an attempt at early release, and the opportunity to prey on vulnerable women.
Wow, very, very well said there. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like she pointed out, they went from priding themselves on being Minnesota's all woman prison, only all woman prison. They went on priding themselves on that, providing a facility for females only, to now accepting men into the prison and giving them the same resources that are meant for women, specifically for females. Makes no sense whatsoever. And it goes against the very thing that they claim to have stood for to begin with. Now, of course, you get people who, make comments like this. No offense, but why does anyone care more about this than when they are in high school sports or locker rooms? And, it's the attitude of these are women are in prison, they've committed crimes. If you don't want to deal with something like this, well, don't commit a crime. There's people who think that, like, why are we taking up for women who are in prison? But I think it's already been pointed out that these are women. The fact is, we can't pick and choose when men don't belong in women's spaces. If we accept it for this, then we lose the argument for all the other circumstances. The fact is that men don't belong in women's spaces. You cannot turn a man into a woman, no matter how he identifies. And this is being allowed where to the point where it's being, they're playing the system clearly. And the fact is, these are men who have committed the most heinous crimes imaginable, and they are then being rewarded. They're literally being rewarded for their crimes. Now they get to go to a woman's prison, which is usually is not as secure. The security at women's prisons generally is less, because it's not as the sort of people you get in there is not as extreme as the men's prison in terms of the crimes they've committed. So they get to go to a prison that has less security. So basically they're given more freedom, and they're given access to women, which is even more disturbing. Even if they've committed a crime against women of a sexual nature, they're literally given access to women. And there's no justification for that whatsoever. People in high schools and locker rooms can leave. It's not the best solution, but they can leave. Okay, going with that line of idiotic reasoning, people can choose to not go to prison too. Once they have been sentenced, they can no longer make that choice. There is no point at which someone can leave a locker room. And then lastly, someone said, because unlike you, most people are able to care about multiple issues at once. This is a men's rights movement, and they are infiltrating all women's spaces. Each space matters. Lee. So I thought that was a very good response there. And, statistically, this person pointed out women that have been abused as children often have drug, alcohol, and other issues as adults, and a higher rate of incarceration. You take vulnerable women who have been traumatized often at the hands of men and traumatize them again by putting men in their prison. They have no protection there. I hope there is a big lawsuit, because it seems to be the only thing that catches the authorities' attention. This is a nightmare. Who is ignorant enough to think it's a good idea? Tim Walls. And, that basically sums it up. And not everyone in prison is guilty. I've said this in my the videos I've done on this. This could happen to anyone. if you end up being accused of a crime, you go to, while you're awaiting trial, you could be completely innocent. It's not like innocent people haven't been accused of a crime. That's why we have a, judicial system. And you could be awaiting your trial. So yeah, even innocent people can get wrapped up into this. Men don't belong in women's prisons. It's as simple as that. And anybody could find themselves in this situation because anybody could be accused of anything, as we've seen. So, and then Alicia, she spoke to Redux as well.
Acted personally when I had a male inmate in my classroom, and that took place in December of 2023. And that really for me was the point where I said, I can't do this any longer. It didn't feel right to me. My students didn't feel safe. We didn't feel like we could just express ourselves as a group of women and that sense of female community of support and learning, and just the great environment that the classroom was suddenly came to a halt. And for me, that was the turning point where I started asking questions from my supervisor and administration and just started questioning things more and more. It felt very stay in your own lane. We respect your concern, but our hands are tied and nothing is going to change. And so I just felt like I was getting nowhere. I will admit that I did not scrounge my way to the top with answers because it's a very chain of command environment. I went to my immediate supervisor. I went to a fellow union member and had conversations with them. And it just felt like I needed to follow the directive. This is the way things were going to be moving forward. I needed to make sure I kept my pronouns straight. And I had to treat this offender like I would any other female in the facility.
Oh, I didn't even mean to stop it on this part.
And I took issue with that. I treat all my students with respect.
Imagine being locked up with the likes of that guy, I'm sorry, who clearly is seeing being a woman as some sort of fetish, wearing woman face. And I believe that particular guy, he's locked up for drug offenses. But even so, this guy was rewarded $500,000 because he's complaining about being put in the men's facility. And like Alicia's saying, the women don't even get a say. She's an accomplished educator, a registered teacher. She has a master's in education. She's raising her concerns and she's being ignored. Absolutely appalling.
My goal is to help them get their GED and move on to bigger and better things. And but throwing a male in there, like I said, it changed the entire environment. And it was very obvious to many people that this offender that I had in my classroom was not presenting as a trans woman and had ulterior motives. And that was the real issue. I think a lot of women who are incarcerated are supporters of the trans community. I don't think they take issue with the trans community. I think they take issue, and staff take issue with male offenders using those terms as a way to gain access to a facility that they believe is easier, that can get them early release, and just access to women.
And this is the issue. I mean, we could say, oh, they're not really trans and whatever you believe. What I don't really, doesn't really matter, because the fact is, once there's a policy, I'm just checking I'm not muted. Once there's a policy that says that a man can identify as a woman and therefore be accepted as a woman into women's spaces, it doesn't matter what their motives are, because the policy itself says that any man can go into that facility, can go into that space. So no one's standing at the, at the door of the woman's bathroom to make sure that this person is genuinely trans. That's not how it works. It's the policy. So the policy that was changed in 2022 or 2023 says that a man can identify himself into a woman's prison, into women's prisons. And once that policy exists, any man can play the system. So regardless of whether you think they're genuine or not, whether you think they're AGPs or people who are dealing with gender dysphoria, which I'm not, I have compassion for people who have certain, all of these different conditions, whatever they are. But whatever the motive of the person, once the policy exists, any man can take advantage of that policy, even if his motive is to go into the women's prison and have access to women and assault women. And we've seen here that men who literally have convictions where they've assaulted women are allowed to use this policy. So there's no safeguarding whatsoever once that policy exists. So thank you so much for the super chat. I don't know if you can see this. It says, love the work you do. Keep sounding the alarm. This is far from over. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rin. I'll get better at navigating these comments at some point. That's why I'm doing more lives, to get used to doing this. And yeah, so the protest took place over the weekend, and it was lovely to see these women getting the support they deserve. And that's what's important. It must feel very lonely being in this situation, because again, just because they're women who have committed crimes, people may have less sympathy for them. But that wasn't the case when it came to this, the turnout for this protest. So Tish Hyman was there.
Yeah. Yo, Shakopee Women's Prison. I hope y'all can hear me in there. My voice is loud, and I hope it reaches you behind those walls to let you know that we are here. We are here to raise awareness about the injustice that's happening in this prison and many prisons throughout America. There are women being housed with men in men's prisons. You can only imagine how that could be dangerous. Sorry, let me rephrase. Women being housed in women's prisons with men. Whether there are 9 men, whether there are 20,000 men, one man is enough to cause havoc in a woman's prison. Okay? I've never been to prison. But I could lay in my bed as I went to sleep last night and think about a man stronger than every female in the prison walking around, picking them out like chickens, and it makes me angry. These are women. They're human beings. Because you committed a crime does not make your life less valuable. You understand? This is insane. And the truth is that many people do not know what's happening in the prisons in America. Well, people of the world who are watching and hearing this, and Shakopee, the women of Shakopee, we're going to let the whole world know what's going on in the women's prison. Men are in there. There is no such thing as a trans. There are just men and women. Some men like to wear dresses, and there's nothing special to see there. Women need protection from men. They should not be in the prisons with us, the locker rooms with us, the sports with us. They are men. I am tired of people acting like they don't have eyes and a brain between their ears. You can see it. They are men. Where are these pictures of these hideous looking men? You see this? You see this? These are women? These are women to you? America? Walls? Whatever that lady's name is, passing this freaky stuff? What is it? Okay? Whatever bill needs to be passed to get them out of here, that's what we need to do. Get them out of the prison, all right? Look at these unsavory pieces of biscuits here. They gotta go. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. It's dangerous. It's very obvious that this is wrong, okay?
Wow, very, very well said there. I mean, perfectly put. That's it. These are men. These are violent criminals. How can anybody justify these dudes being in the woman's facility? Absolutely makes no sense whatsoever.
We just pulled up to Shakopee. We are getting ready to set up, and today we are going to be rallying in support of the incarcerated women who are currently forcibly housed with fully intact predatory males. This is not just the California issue. This is a Minnesota issue. This is an American issue, and this is a nationwide female human rights crisis.
Yep, just because one's in prison doesn't mean that you're not human. These are human beings being treated this way. Pieces of biscuits. Yeah, that's what they are. Very well put there. Love seeing Amy too. She's a warrior. Pure insanity. Absolutely. At this point, they should start a revolution against the woke government that is allowing this monstrosity. And I'm just, everything has to eventually come through the legislation. That's what we want to see changed. But these woke governors or whatever, they need to get out. They need to go. Tim Walz, can you imagine if he was VP right now? It'd be better to go and live on Mars if that guy was VP right now. I mean, and then they claim to care about women, or they're, the party of women or whatever. Just absolute gaslighting. Fully intact males. How do they see that as a woman? And, whether they've had this, none of these guys have had the surgery. They've got themselves some breasts, at most, but that doesn't even matter. If you're male, you shouldn't be in the women's prison. It's as simple as that. So this was another advocate who spoke at the protest. And then we're going to get to the letters from the actual female inmates themselves. And it's heartbreaking to hear their stories, to hear what they've been subjected to.
My name is Rebecca Delahunt. I work as Director of Public Policy with Minnesota Family Council, and we are the Protestant voice at the state capitol. We are so honored to stand with you today in protection of vulnerable women.
Yes.
Yes. For the past legislative sessions, Minnesota Family Council and our legal arm, True North Legal, have lobbied in protection of the women here at Shakopee. At times been the only voice of protection for these women here until brave former DOC employee Alicia Beckmann, who you will hear from in a little bit, shared her story as well. So we are growing in number. Women incarcerated here at Shakopee, Minnesota's only prison for women, have been forced to share these facilities in recent years with males. But the legislature can protect these women in state law. As of today, Sunday, November 16th, 2025, there are multiple males here at Shakopee inside right now. I'm just going to share about a few of them. One male is serving time for sexual abuse. There's a male serving life for homicide. And there's a male serving time for assault. They are all inside right now with the women. Minnesota Family Council argues for protection of all women in all private spaces, in gyms, in restrooms, certainly in prison facilities. This is fundamentally different. A woman can boycott a sports team if there's a male taking her spot. A woman can hopefully leave a restroom facility if there's a male inside. Women here cannot leave this facility. They are stuck inside. This is barbaric injustice. Because of the DOC's policy to house in accordance with so-called gender identity, the women's voices are silenced by male manipulators. Minnesota Family Council has lobbied in support of a bill to keep Shakopee for women IPs only, supported by Chair Novotny, who's here in the audience today. Thank you, Representative Novotny, for protecting women. We also oppose the so-called Equal Rights Amendment, or ERA, which would give our state constitution constitutional protection for gender identity. This is much higher legal protection than any DOC policy. This would change our state constitution to give males constitutional protection to women's private spaces like prison facilities. This cannot pass in Minnesota. We call on the legislature to support laws that protect vulnerable women, reject any public policy that prioritizes male manipulators over basic justice and safety for vulnerable women. Thank you.
Oops, I muted myself there. So it's good to see these advocacy groups standing up for these women because they are locked up, literally locked up with these men. What else are they supposed to do? They must feel powerless as well because, I mean, they can't just come to this protest. They don't have that option. So it's up to us to speak for them on their behalf and to share their story. And I'm so glad their letters were read out at this protest. You know, some of the stories we're going to hear, they are very graphic, just to warn you guys. It's very unpleasant. You know, they're just speaking about the harassment that they've received at the hands of these men who claim to be women. And what's so disturbing is it's these men, these monsters, that are included in the label of someone being vulnerable. People see these men as the vulnerable ones. You saw there with the that news clip I showed you. Is she okay? How is she doing? She wasn't put in the appropriate facilities. These monsters are the ones seen as the vulnerable ones. And the women who speak out about this, they've spoken out anonymously, many of them, because, you know, even these women aren't allowed to object and to say that they don't want to be housed with men. They get called bigots. And I just don't see how we got here where we see ex-offenders and, you know, murderers as the vulnerable ones. Literally, even the violent criminals are considered the vulnerable ones simply because of how they identify. So let's listen to the letters that were read out.
I'm going to start with a letter. This is from Jennifer Baldwin, who is an incarcerated woman here at MCF Shakopee. Jennifer writes, "The transgender policy states that biological males or transgender women are allowed to come here to Shakopee as long as they are safe and us women here are safe. How can they make that determination that us women will be safe prior to the biological male or transgender woman arriving here in Shakopee? One of the men allowed to come here exposed himself to several of the female inmates, while another one has threatened multiple women here. Although all the inmate rooms lock, the showers do not. How are us women here considered safe when issues like these are happening? All the men here have spent significant time in segregation due to threats, destruction of state property, and allegations of PREA, which has happened but was unable to be proven. The simple answer is that we are not safe. The men are taking our hard-earned single rooms and are allowed to keep them regardless of any discipline they may receive, while us women must work hard to receive a single room and maintain good behavior to keep them. The biological male or transgender woman does not, nor do they have to share a room with another male or transgender woman. There is no reason why biological men or transgender women should be allowed in a women's correctional facility." Our next reader is going to be Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Michelle, and I'm very glad to be here. This is from an anonymous woman at Shakopee. 2 more men just got here. One is Nathan Jones. 2 more men just got here. One is Nathan Jones. I don't know the name of the other one. Word is more are coming. This is very disturbing. Us women who earned single cells are being kicked out of our cells so the men who are coming can be put in them. We are all so frustrated and don't know what to do. Nathan Jones is not trying to appear as a woman at all. He did tell someone that he identifies just as a bisexual man. I don't know how true they are, but there are a lot of rumors of him speaking about selling his sperm. I don't know why they are making this a co-ed prison. There are no longer women's prisons in Minnesota. A lot of women in here are upset and trying to find ways to speak out about this. Some are here reaching out to the news, but in reality, because of the nature of it all and the stigma of trans in the U.S., I don't know how many women feel safe to speak about it. People forget, though, this isn't about the trans community. It's about putting biological men inside a women's prison. It's not okay. It's not safe for us. We are supposed to be here trying to redirect our lives and heal from past trauma to only be re-traumatized. We need to get our voices heard. And I have another one here from a woman who, her name is Susan Berkovitz. She wanted her name spoken. She's also a Shakopee. And she says, the fact that our governor has signed an order allowing males to come to a female prison and take the single rooms from the women who earn them is frustrating and unfair. Those of us who earn these rooms had to keep a job continuously and have no discipline write-ups for minor infractions, such as sleeping during count time, loitering, no segregation. If a woman goes to segregation, she has to wait a whole year upon release before again qualifying for a single room. But the men come here and take away these rooms that the women had. If the men go back to segregation, when they get out, they immediately go right back into a single room. The women who are on the waiting list, they got bumped off. There's no reason why the men are not paired together in a room. They came here with the same idea of either being afraid of men in the men's prison, although they are no different than them, where they used to be put in protective custody, but now send them here to be safe. Why can't they be put in a room together? And they do have protective custody. Any man who feels unsafe in a men's prison, there's protective custody. But that's not what they're looking for. I spoke to a couple of reporters from the Tribune, but nothing prevailed. Can you...
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, that's a really good point. These men have all options. They have options. So it's as clear as day that it's not about what they claim that it's about. So liberalism has been the majority government in Minnesota for decades. People from all over the country would move there just to collect generous government assistance checks. Yeah, I can believe that, because clearly they're using taxpayers' money to pay out that legal case with $500,000 with the guy who wanted to get a boob job and get all this gender affirming care. You can see the mismanagement of funds is commonplace there.
Please talk to the media. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next reader is going to be Carrie.
Let me catch up. Sorry. All right, here we go. This is from an anonymous woman at Shakopee. I wanted to let you know that Nathan Jones went to segregation for threatening one of the other inmates here. I believe when he gets out, he will be coming back to the unit I'm in, and of course will be going into a single room once again. Many women have brought it to the staff's attention that they do not feel safe around him, so maybe he will end up getting sent back to the men's. We can only pray that happens.
Thank you, Carrie. The next reader is going to be Kathy.
Hi, I'm going to read a letter from Jennifer Baldwin, and she is here in Shakopee. As I am sure you are aware, 2 more men have recently come here. One of them has already threatened multiple women here. Many of the women in here, including myself, have been abused by a man, and it's very triggering that these men especially are with these men here, especially when they are threatening women. Nathan Jones makes everyone around him very uncomfortable with his comments or the inappropriate touching. He doesn't wear anything underneath his shorts or pants, so his male parts are very free-moving. To my understanding, there have been reports made by staff. These men come here and go right to a single room, forcing those in them to have to move out. Single rooms are the only incentive we have here for being discipline-free, and it's being taken from us. Some of us have asked staff why the men can't be housed together in the same room and have been told to mind their business as it doesn't concern them. There is no reason why two men with the same body parts cannot share a room with one another. Most of the men here, like Nathan Jones, have no intentions of transitioning to be a female, but rather they say it to get over here. Men should have had to have gone through surgery before they are allowed to come here to a female facility. It is not fair to any of us women here. They are getting special treatment and taking our rooms that we worked so hard to get and keep. Thank you.
Yeah, and I get the logic behind it, but even with the whole surgery, I just think if you're male, that's it. You do not belong in a women's facility. I don't care what surgery you've had. You could argue they're less of a threat, perhaps, if they've had all the surgery, but I just think we need to bring back just blanket common sense rules. Men and women, male and female, that's it. There's no identifying yourself into the opposite sex, regardless of what procedures you've had. Because and another thing I noticed is these men are given special privileges. It's so infuriating. Why are they given the single rooms? And the women who have shown good behavior, who are expecting certain rewards as you get in prison for good behavior, they're overlooked. I don't understand why everyone's bending over backwards for these men, for these predators, giving them special treatment. We must put them in the single room. We must protect them. People will say, oh, well, they can't go to the men's prison, but it's okay for women to be locked up with these men. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
Thank you, Kathy. Next up is going to be Brianna.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'll be reading words from an anonymous incarcerated woman here at Shakopee. This stuff with the men being here is very new. I have been in and out of Shakopee since 2019, and just this past time, since 2024, is the only time we have had to go through what we are going through now. I can understand having women who are transitioning to men here, but for us to have full-on men here is ridiculous, and it is unfair to us. I have extreme post-traumatic stress disorder and have been put through things such as rape, trafficking, and domestic abuse. Having men here, somewhere I should be able to be safe and have a chance to heal, is cruel. I understand this is prison, but it is a women's prison, not a co-ed one. Currently, there are 5 men here. 2 of them are transitioning and have had chest surgery, but they are still here for crimes against women. I feel that they are using this as an excuse to not be in the men's prison. One of them is Elijah Berryman. He is here for raping his 8-year-old brother multiple times, and it makes me sick to even look at him. He is in college classes with me, and I feel it is unfair to place him in a class with us and to have to listen to him talk about raising a family and how to be with children. We also have a man here who is not even transitioning at all and is just a bisexual man. We are losing our single cell privileges to these men who have single rooms. This man has already threatened women in here and tried to sell sperm.
Thank you, Brianna. Next, I'm going to read from an anonymous incarcerated woman here at Shakopee. She writes, I find it unfair that women inmates who earned a single room to reside in for good behavior are forced to give up their room to give to men. If a woman who earned a single room gets disciplined or goes to segregation, she must wait 1 to 2 years to get back on the list to qualify to earn a single room again. But the guys automatically get back their single room. It's discrimination against female inmates. They could pair the guys together in a double room, but they won't. A couple of them still have their male parts, and those who want to change or are in the process of changing automatically get a single room, which displaces the women who were in those rooms and who earned them for good behavior. A person should be in a prison according to the sex they were born as. So men should be in a men's prison or in protective custody if they are afraid of men in a men's prison. There is another inmate in my unit who feels very strongly that men who still have male parts should not be in a women's prison. I asked her if she would talk to you. She said she doesn't want to, but there are many of us who feel the way that we do. Our next reader is going to be Carrie.
Okay. This is from Chaos Bell, incarcerated woman from MCF Shakopee. While us women are trying to rehabilitate, we get surrounded by abusive men claiming to be women in our spaces. These men are sharing groups with us like Women Healing from Trauma. This group doesn't work if we can't be open to talk about our trauma that was most likely caused by men. We shouldn't have to share showers or bathroom stalls with men who are convicted sex offenders. When I was down a hall with Danny Whitebeard, I was terrified of taking a shower in fear he would come after me. There are no locks on the doors, and the staff aren't really paying attention. I'm sure you heard what happened to me on Liz Collins' podcast. I was sexually assaulted and got no help from that situation. No one has checked on me from it. When the PREA people came here to talk with us, I wasn't chosen to talk with them when I should have been, since I was sexually assaulted. When I reported it, I was given a PREA card, and there were no consequences for Danny, and no further discussion happened. I spoke to the warden in December and asked for a copy of my PREA report, and she said she wasn't going to give it to me per policy. I believe my rights to that report were violated, but I don't know what to do about that. There needs to be a change. This is supposed to be a safe place for women to rehabilitate, but that safety was taken the moment they put biological men with sex crimes amongst us. The policy for the men to come here says they can only be housed here if they are safe and we are safe. But how could they have ever thought that we would be safe with biological men who are sex offenders, who look like men, and who are in here developing relationships with women? Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. We just have one more letter. Our last letter from a woman here in Shakopee is going to be read by Kathy.
Here we have another letter by somebody in Shakopee. This is from Chaos Bell, and she writes, "This message is directed at Governor Tim Walz. After allowing men in our safe spaces where we are sent for rehabilitation, you have created an unsafe environment for us. In fact, you created more trauma, loss of security, and our right to be simply safe. I was traumatized after a biological male inmate showed me his penis. The unwanted trauma sent me back to a dark place. Because staff here are so afraid of losing their jobs for speaking out against this wrong, about this wrong, we as inmates have to risk speaking out for ourselves in a place where staff should believe we are already safe, but we are not, and they cannot protect us. Please take back your wrong and send the predatory biological men back to the men's prison so us women can have safety and security back. Thank you."
Wow, yeah. People, pretty weird duck. People, there's so many who don't believe it's happening. And people aren't exposed to this sort of thing. So if you're just getting on with your everyday life, you may hear about, these sort of debates, but not really be exposed to this sort of information where women are giving testimonies. You won't believe it. It's just hard to believe that they're literally allowing men into women's prisons, and not just you know, vetting these men or whatever, but men who are literally S offenders, they're allowing them into women's prisons, giving them access to women. It is unbelievable. It's either that they don't believe it or they don't want to believe it. And that's where we're at now. So it's so important that these women have their stories heard and people have to confront this situation. Are you okay with this? Are you okay? No matter how a man identifies, being allowed into a women's prison, how can any sane person justify that? And then lastly, I don't want to keep you guys here for too long. So we're going to hear from a female inmate, a former inmate of Shakopee Women's Correctional Facility. And she calls out Tim Walz. She calls out, you know, the state for allowing this in the first place and their mismanagement when it comes to policy and the effect it has on women in general. And, you know, it's really interesting to see the points that she raises. But she also talks about how much of a scam this is, that these men are playing the system. How can you give somebody who abused children, she's going to go into that as well, just to warn you, like 6-year-old girls, this man, you know, committed crimes against 6-year-old girls. How can you be bothered about whether he's being allowed to stay somewhere according to his gender identity? Why on earth is that even important? This guy needs to be locked up forever. And the last thing we need to care about are his feelings. And then on top of that, you're endangering women. So let's take a look. This is the last one.
Move them into what's supposed to be an all-women's prison. These are born biological men that have lied and hid behind the transgender women identity policy. They've had their own agendas, one being Sean Wingland. Sean Wingland was a convicted child molester. He was convicted for molesting his twin 6-year-old relatives. He was housed here, and as soon as he got here, began his own agenda. He began sleeping with an inmate whose name I will not disclose. He began sleeping with, she's an important person. And his agenda was to get her and or any other IPs, important people, pregnant in what he was going to call, unquote, quote unquote, the $1 million baby scheme against the Department of Corrections. He had been put in segregation after repeated attempts and episodes of sleeping with incarcerated people, important people here in Shakopee. Eventually, he was then moved last year in October back to an all-men's facility. He's currently housed in Lionel Lakes. Did anybody become aware of that? No. Yes. Was anyone aware of this so-called transgender woman sleeping with the IPs here at Shakopee Correctional Facility? No. But there's an even bigger picture. I don't think many people are aware that there are men being housed in this women's prison. These are men with men genitalia being housed with women in what's supposed to be an all-women's prison. Governor Tim Walz, Commissioner Chanel, and Attorney General Keith Ellison swept it under the rug. You swept the fact that a born biological man repeatedly has sexual relationships with important people inside an all-women's facility. You swept it under the rug. You wanted it to just go away. And you quietly shipped him back to a men's facility. Well, I made a pact with 500 plus fellow sisters of mine that are currently behind all my supporters, all their supporters, all these voices. I promised them the whole 10 traumatic living nightmare months that I spent behind them walls with them. I promised them that as soon as I got out, after I literally threw up while sobbing, I was gonna go get a lawyer and I was gonna fight for them. This fight isn't over. This fight is just beginning. I will not stop until you immediately remove these predatory men from out of Shakopee Women's Prison, and you immediately remove the men from all the Department of Corrections across the United States, and you dismantle this policy, this dangerous policy. Me and all my fellow sisters, thousands of women across the United States, are being victimized. We're being forced to live in a dangerous housing situation. Many people are thinking, oh, well, we should wait till the what if. The what if already happened. It is happening. Many women have been raped, sex trafficked, sexually harassed and abused at the hands of these so-called transgender women. But what's even scarier and more disheartening and angry is the fact that some of these same facilities that have adopted these policies have also helped these so-called transgender men with their nasty agendas. We don't hear about none of this in the news, do we? It's more important to hear about what Governor Walz ain't doing. But we're also talking about a governor who's the governor behind a state that's got so much state fraud going on. Commissioner Schnell, your beautiful ex-wife, Julie Schnell, was just recently sentenced to some time here in Shakopee. The lovely Shakopee Women's Facility, all women. She'll be coming here. If she's not, what's that look like? Is it okay to have these men with her? Oh, she's your ex-wife. You probably don't give a rat's ass. Governor Walz, if the lovely First Lady Walz, because nobody's perfect, just saying, your audit wasn't very clean. Well, you're a man. They would send you here, just saying. If, let's just say, your First Lady ends up, for whatever reason, behind you, or maybe your granddaughter, would it be okay for her to be housed with these dangerous, predatory, convicted murderers, child molesters, rapists? Then again, you voluntarily put them here with me. You voluntarily put them here with other mothers, wives, sisters, daughters, so you probably wouldn't give a rat's ass. So, message, memo, hope y'all got this on tape. So if you think this is over, I'm just gonna go away, we're just gonna go away, newsflash, hell no, we won't go. Just so you know, come Thanksgiving, even if it's a governor's mansion family dinner inside, I will be having a turkey dinner for one outside the governor's mansion. This interview is over.
Wow. What a great advocate for the women that are still in prison now. And I'm sure, she's true to her word that she's going to fight for them to be in a place that's safe. Yes, they are incarcerated, but they still deserve to be safe. They can't be locked up in a dangerous situation. That's just unacceptable. And she was talking about a commissioner whose wife is about to be put into that prison. Yeah, maybe he doesn't care, but even so, or ex-wife. This woman is going to be locked up in Shakopee because that's the only women's prison there. This story is insane.
The wife of one of Minnesota's top public safety leaders is accused of trying to kill their vulnerable son. Julie Meyer Schnell, who is married to Minnesota Department of Corrections Commissioner Paul Schnell, is charged with attempted murder. Investigators say that she put her anxiety medication in her adult son's feeding bag, quote, hoping that he would go to sleep forever. Meyer Schnell reportedly told investigators that she completely regretted he survived. Court documents show her son lives in a group home and that she texted him confessing she tried to kill him. He told investigators it was heavy and it's a lot to process. Meyer Schnell and Commissioner Paul Schnell are currently going through a divorce.
That's who she was talking about there. So that woman's going to Shakopee. So we'll see, like she said, if it happens to your wife or a woman you care about, is that going to be okay? It's all very well making these policies just to give yourself a pat on the back, to appeal to the the woke or whatever, and, to play politics. But these are real people's lives that are being affected as we speak. And these women are human beings. They don't deserve to be entrapped with predators. So, yeah, I think that the protests occurred over the weekend in Minneapolis. And, we saw Tish Hyman was there, and many different advocates came forward to speak. And I was really glad that the letters from the actual inmates, the women who were being affected by this policy, they got their voices heard as well. For those of you who are just joining us. Yep. This is happening everywhere in women's prisons. So I believe it's the state-run prisons. Unfortunately, we have the executive order that says that, you are put in prison according to your biological sex, and that's what it comes down to federally. But when it comes to these state prisons, like Shakopee, it's still being allowed because they're subjected to state law. So these crazy, governors who are allowing this, who have these ridiculous policies, they're okay with women being locked up with men, essentially. And saying trans women are women doesn't change that reality. Not only are they locked up with men, they're locked up with predators, violent offenders, and those who are guilty of crimes against women and children. Not locked up with them, just in the same facility, but also being forced to use the same showers as these men. Some of them have been moved back to the men's prison. A couple of them have, after it was proven. The very thing that people said was going to happen happened. Women were making it clear that they're in fear for their safety. And I guess they had to move these two men back. But there are still plenty in this women's prison, and there are still many who are being moved there as we speak, simply due to identity, which, as some of you have pointed out, takes precedence now over biological sex. Once you say that you can identify your way into being the opposite sex, the laws that pertain to biological sex become meaningless. The laws that pertain to women become meaningless. So I'll just read a couple more comments, and then I think we can end it there. Thank you so much for joining this live. Thank you so much for the super chats and all your comments, all the super stickers. Thanks so much for your support. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, share this. And I just thought it was important that the women who wrote those letters, the women who gave testimonies, had their voices heard. 60% of trans-identified males claiming as such in prison are SOSs. Thanks for the reporting. Thank you for joining. What does that stand for? SO. I'm not sure. Oh, yes, yeah. They are S offenders. I'm still trying to use YouTube-friendly language, but whatever. Yeah. The majority of them are in prison for crimes against women. They wouldn't even be in prison if they hadn't committed a crime against women or children. And these are the people they think it's appropriate to put in a unit with women, literally rewarding them and giving them access to women. How does that make sense? Honestly. Thank you, Erin. And thank you for joining the membership as well. I'm going to keep up with my members only content, doing a better job at keeping up with that. So yeah, some of these, politicians, they have trans kids themselves, so-called trans kids, or they just have a vested interest in keeping this going because of whatever their ideology they subscribe to is, or maybe they have a family member. I do believe Tish Hyman has a sister who is in prison at the moment who identifies as trans. So, she came out to support these women. Can you imagine, maybe her sister's in a prison in New York, because I believe she's from the Bronx as originally. So you know, it's just unimaginable. It really is. Oh, thank you, Erin. Thank you for the $4.99 super sticker. That's very kind of you. Yep, they call themselves trans or non-binary to get around that. And then we get men who suddenly start identifying as trans when their trial's going on, because they know they can get moved to the women's prison. Even if, you know, they're not there to prey on the women, they know that they're going to get an easier ride in a women's prison. And of course, more than likely, they are there to prey on the women. Majority of the men who end up, you know, in this situation are there because of crimes against women to begin with. Thank you so much, David. Have a great day and keep up the good work. You have a great day as well. Yeah, I think that's the we can end it there. We've been here for an hour and 10 minutes. So I'm glad I got to share those testimonies with you. And thank you so much for continuing to support the channel. And let's get this story out there. These women need to have their voices heard. People need to be aware that this is going on. It is unbelievable, but this is the reality that these women are facing every day. And they have no choice. They have no choice. So I'll end it there. Everybody have a lovely day. I know those stories are pretty intense, but we need to be aware of these things. So I will join you for the next video. I've got a video coming out about a young girl who was bullied by her school and a sporting body in Oregon because she protested a trans athlete. So look out for that video. Take care, everybody. Yeah, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.